Well, welcome to the Ministry of Grace Bible study in the book of Revelation. This week we're in chapter 15. Everybody have their notes and books? Okay, good. Chapter 15, verse 1. Then I saw another sign in heaven, great and amazing, 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last, for with them the wrath of God is finished. We could probably spend all night on this verse, but I won't. John says, then I saw another sign. How many signs has John seen so far in the book of Revelation? Anybody know? What? Nope, this is actually the third sign that he's seen. The first one was in Revelation 12:1, when he said, and a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And then in verse 3 in chapter 12, he said, and another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. So the word sign is the Greek word semeion, which means a sign or miracle with a spiritual end and purpose. Now, we are interpreting the book of Revelation literally, but when it says there was a sign, we know that that's a clue that that's not literal. It's a sign. It's not an event actually happening. He said, another sign in heaven, great and amazing, 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last. Next time we'll get into chapter 16, which talks about most of these bowl judgments. Remember, there were 7 seal judgments, then there were 7 trumpet judgments, and then 7 bowl judgments. And if you compare the trumpet judgments and the bowl judgments, they're very similar. The first one, the trumpet and the bowl, affects the earth. The second one, trying to remember, I think affects the sun. It affects the rivers. And the third one affects the sun, etc. So a number of people, in fact several good commentators, believe that the trumpets and the bowls are sounded simultaneously. The problem with that is what it says in this verse. It says, 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last, for with them the wrath of God is finished. These are different than the trumpet judgments. And if we get a chance next week, we'll look at a comparison of them, and I'll show you why they're not the same. The only other mention of signs in the book of Revelation are signs and wonders that are performed by the false prophet. Okay? For instance, back in chapter 13, that is the beast out of the earth, with the false prophet, it performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And in the next chapter, chapter 16, for they are demonic spirits performing signs, who go abroad to the kings of the whole world to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. And then finally, in chapter 19, we will read, and the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who is in its presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. So those are the other references to signs. So John sees 3 of them, but there are others performed by the false prophet. Now it says there the 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last. Literally, this reads the 7 plagues, the last ones. So these are the end of the judgments of God. And then at the end of this verse it says, for with them the wrath of God is finished. That's literally brought to an end. So with these final 7 bowl judgments, God's wrath is completely poured out. Verse 2, and I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass mingled with fire, and also those who had conquered the beast and its image and the number of its name, standing beside the sea of glass with harps of God in their hands. Okay, the word glass is hulinos, which means something that's transparent, like glass. So John saw in this vision, he saw the 7 angels, and he saw before them this vast flat area of clear glass. And remember, the throne room of God that we saw in chapter 6 had a glass floor. And what was underneath the throne room? Paradise, that's right, because underneath the altar were the martyrs, and they were in paradise. Okay. And back in chapter 4, it says, before the throne there was, as it were, a sea of glass like crystal, and around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and behind. Also, at Mount Sinai, when God gave the law to Moses, actually before he gave it to Moses, he appeared on the mountain, and Moses took Joshua and Nadab and Abihu and 70 of the elders of Israel on up the mountain, and they saw a vision of God. And it says this in Exodus 24, verses 9 and 10. Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. So this apparently was the same kind of scene where there was a sea of glass, only in this case it was blue. So back in verse 2 it says, appeared to be a sea of glass mingled with fire. And that's the word mixed, mignumi. So it looks like this floor is also burning somehow. It's a red color, and there probably were the appearance of flames. Red and fire are both symbols of God's judgment. So this is an indication as these angels come down that God's just about to judge. Verse 3. And they, who is they? We have to go back to verse 2. And verse 2 said, and those who had conquered the beast and its image and the number of the names, standing beside the sea of glass, with harps of God in their hands. The word translated harps is, I think, a fascinating word. It's kitaros, like a guitar. In fact, the word guitar comes from that Greek word kitaros, meaning a harp. So these are ones who have conquered the beast. That is, they have given up their lives because of their faith, because they refuse to worship the beast or receive his mark. And they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, great and amazing are your deeds, O Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of nations. Who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. All nations will come and worship you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. Where do we find the Song of Moses in the Old Testament? Just look up in your index where it says Song of Moses. I'm teasing. It's not identified anywhere. There is no song in the Old Testament that's called the Song of Moses. I'm what? Quit teasing you? There are a couple of passages in the Exodus. Exodus 15:1 says, then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. Now obviously that's a song that Israel sang after they crossed the Red Sea and Pharaoh and his armies were drowned in the sea. But also, verses 11 through 13 of that chapter, it says, "Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by the strength of your holy abode." So either one of these could be interpreted as, or all of this together as the Song of Moses. In fact, it goes on in Exodus 15 to say, "Terror and dread fell upon them. Because of the greatness of your arm, they are still as a stone, till your people, O Lord, pass by. Till the people pass by whom you have purchased, you will bring them in and plant them on your own mountain, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord will reign forever and ever." Now it's possible that that's the song that they sang, the Song of Moses, but we don't know for sure. There is no song recorded in Scripture as the Song of the Lamb. However, there are a couple of songs which are sung about the Lamb. The first one is Revelation 5, verses 9 and 10. "And they sang a new song, saying, Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth." Also, just a couple of verses after that, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing." So these two could be the Song of Moses and the Song of the Lamb. We don't know for sure. Revelation 15:5. "After this," after they sang the songs, "after this I looked, and the sanctuary of the tent of witness in heaven was opened." The fact that he said "after this" is an indication to us that what he's about to describe here is not part of the sign. Okay? The sign was these angels coming with the 7 bowls of the plagues, the last ones. "I looked, and the sanctuary," the word sanctuary is the Greek word naos, and we've talked about this before. In the temple, on the Temple Mount, the entire temple area was called the Hieron. That's the whole temple complex. The building in the center that has the holy place and the Holy of Holies is called the Naon, or the Naos. That's, in Greek thinking, that's where the God lived. And in the Holy of Holies, in the temple, there was the Ark of the Covenant. And what was in the Ark? Anybody remember? The 10 Commandments, the 2 tablets, Aaron's rod that budded, and a bowl full of Cheerios? No, manna. Okay? And directly on top of the ark was the mercy seat that had the 2 cherubim with their wings outstretched, just barely touching. Okay? And God was said to reside between the cherubim on the mercy seat. So it's in keeping with the same belief that the Greeks had. Now it said, "After this I looked, and the sanctuary of the tent of witness in heaven was opened." The word tent is skene, which means a temporary dwelling place. It's also referred to in Exodus as a tabernacle. Remember, they assembled a tabernacle in the wilderness, and it was in there that the ark was. And when they moved from place to place, they covered up the ark and took down the temple, the tabernacle, moved to the next place, erected the tabernacle, and put the ark inside, and then covered it, the tabernacle. Now that tabernacle was known as the tabernacle of witness. Here it's translated tent of witness. It's the same thing. Now the earthly tabernacle, like I said, it was created in the wilderness as they were wandering. And it was like the temple in one sense. There was a curtain around the entire area, and Jews could go into there, but they could not go into the tabernacle proper itself, because it's representation of the temple that was soon to be built, which was a representation of the tabernacle in heaven. And on the temple that the tabernacle was built after, there was a holy place and a most holy place, or Holy of Holies. And who could go into the Holy of Holies? The high priest was the only person that could go in there. He went into the Holy of Holies one day a year to make an offering for the people, and he sprinkled the blood of the offering on the mercy seat. It's interesting that his garment had bells tied around the bottom of it. And when he went in there, he had a rope tied to his foot. Okay? So if something were to happen to him, if he did something wrong and was struck dead by God, they would know it because the bells would stop tinkling, and they would be able to pull him out because nobody else could go in there. This same curtain or veil, what happened to it when Christ rose from the dead? It was torn in two from top to bottom. Okay, so it wasn't from bottom to top. It wasn't a man tearing it. It was God tearing it, right. Okay, so this tabernacle in heaven now is open now. Okay, why can it be opened and people see the ark?
Because we've been cleansed by it.
Because the blood of the Lamb has cleansed everybody here. And out of the sanctuary came 7 angels with the 7 plagues, clothed in pure, bright linen, with golden sashes around their chests. And it says here, the 7 angels with the 7 plagues. It's a present tense. So the 7 angels having the 7 plagues. And yet we'll see in the next chapter where it talks about them being given to the angels. We'll get there. Okay, they were clothed in pure bright linen. What's the indication of bright white linen? Purity and holiness. And golden sashes around their chest. The word sashes comes from the Greek word zome. And the word wrapped around is perizonumi. So it's a wrapping wrapped around their chests. Okay, so it's probably of 18 inches to 2 feet wide that was wrapped around there, which is what the priests had in the Old Testament. Okay, and they had an ephod with a breastplate on top of it that had the 12 stones for the 12 tribes. Okay, these are not representation of the priest. These are angels of holy angels. And one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. But what we just saw in the verse before, that they already had the 7 plagues. In the Greek it says the 7 angels, the ones having the 7 plagues. So it could imply that they were the ones later that were having the 7 plagues. Because here it says in the next verse that one of the 4 living creatures gave them 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God. Remember, Revelation is a book of God's wrath. And this is the final act of his wrath in these 7 bowls. If you'll look at your chart for a second, I want to show you something. As we have said before, the 7 trumpets are these in here. The 7 bowls are placed vertically like this because they happen rapid fire, one right after the other. In fact, the first bowl is a loathsome sore that breaks out on people. And And after the fourth bowl, we'll get to this next week, it talks about them still being in anguish from the sores. So you're right. They don't get to recover from one before the next comes. These 7 will come just rapid fire, one right after the other, and it is the wrath of God being poured out. Verse 8, and the sanctuary was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one could enter the sanctuary until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. Remember, we talked before about God's glory is frequently represented in smoke. And his glory now fills the tabernacle now that the angels have left with these bowls, and God's glory is up there, and they're about to pour these out. This is just a precursor. This sign that John saw is like a warning of what is about to come. Next week, as we look at chapter 16, we will see some of the horrendous things that are going to happen to the permanent earth dwellers. And as you said earlier, they still refuse to believe. In fact, they will shake their fists at God. In fact, they will go to war against God. You're right, they believe that the beast is God on earth. And because the Jews are still on earth, and they keep saying there is a God in heaven, but the permanent earth dwellers refuse to believe in the God of heaven. Does that sound familiar? There are so many today, particularly those on the left side of the political spectrum, who refuse to believe in God, who believe that we can be our own gods, and very soon they will find out that there is someone who claims to be God. So next week, woe to those who remain on the earth, the permanent earth dwellers. Yeah, they're probably shaking their fist at Jews themselves. Okay? Because the Battle of Armageddon is when the whole world comes to destroy the Jews, not realizing that they are actually going to war against the God of all creation. Okay, next week, chapter 16. Thank you.